The humid air hung heavy over the Combahee River on a distinct night in June 1863. 3 Federal gunboats glided silently through the dark water, avoiding the Confederate mines hidden beneath the surface. This was not a standard Union maneuver led by a West Point graduate, but a raid orchestrated by a former slave who knew these waterways better than any mapmaker. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic chugging of the steam engines and the nervous breathing of the soldiers on board. They were deep in enemy territory where capture meant certain death or a return to the chains of slavery. The fog obscured the banks where danger waited. Every shadow on the riverbank could conceal a Confederate sentry ready to raise the alarm and bring down fire upon the vulnerable vessels. The stakes of this mission were impossibly high for everyone involved in the operation. If the raid failed, the Union would lose 3 valuable ships and hundreds of brave soldiers to the Confederate forces. More importantly, the hundreds of enslaved people waiting on the rice plantations along the river would face brutal retribution for any attempted escape. The Confederacy relied on these plantations to feed their armies and sustain their economy during the war. Disrupting this supply line was critical for the Union war effort, but the risk of navigating the torpedo-filled waters was immense. A single wrong turn or a premature signal could doom the entire expedition to a watery grave or a firing squad. At the helm of this daring operation stood a woman of small stature but immense courage named Harriet Tubman. Known to many as Moses for her work on the Underground Railroad, she had now taken on the role of a military leader and scout for the Union Army. She stood on the deck of the John Adams, wrapped in a dark coat, with her eyes scanning the darkness for signals from the scouts she had placed earlier. Harriet Tubman was the only woman in United States history to plan and lead an armed assault during the Civil War. Her knowledge of the terrain and her network of spies made her more valuable than a regiment of cavalry. As the gunboats approached the designated landing points, the question on every mind was whether the plan would hold together under the chaos of war. Would the enslaved people trust the sound of the steam whistles as the signal for liberation, or would fear keep them hidden in their quarters? The Confederate response was inevitable and swift as artillery fire began to rain down from the shore. The soldiers returned fire, but the outcome depended on the speed of the evacuation. Could Harriet Tubman coordinate the chaos of hundreds of frightened people rushing toward the river while under enemy fire? The margin for error was non-existent, and the lives of over 700 souls hung in the balance. The reveal came as the steam whistles blew and chaos erupted on the riverbanks. Hundreds of men, women, and children rushed from the fields and cabins carrying bundles of their meager possessions. Harriet Tubman stood calm amidst the bedlam, directing the loading of the small boats and singing songs of comfort to calm the terrified refugees. The raid was a resounding success, resulting in the liberation of more than 700 enslaved people and the destruction of millions of dollars in Confederate property. The Combahee River raid proved that women could not only contribute to the war effort, but could lead military operations with devastating effectiveness. While Harriet Tubman led raids in the South, other women were redefining their roles on the blood-soaked fields of the North. The American Civil War shattered the illusion that war was solely the domain of men. In the chaotic aftermath of battles, the traditional medical systems collapsed under the sheer volume of casualties. Wounded soldiers lay for days in agony without water or bandages. It was in this vacuum of care that women stepped forward to provide essential medical services. They left the safety of their homes to wade through the mud and blood of the battlefield, turning barns and churches into makeshift hospitals. One such figure was Clara Barton, who would later found the American Red Cross. During the Battle of Antietam, she did not wait in the rear hospitals, but drove her supply wagon directly to the front lines. She bandaged wounds while bullets whizzed past her head and artillery shells exploded nearby. At one point, a bullet passed through the sleeve of her dress and killed the soldier she was tending. Clara Barton worked without sleep for days, ensuring that the wounded received the care they desperately needed. Her presence brought a semblance of humanity to the inhumanity of industrial warfare, earning her the title Angel of the Battlefield. The contributions of women in the Civil War were not limited to nursing or overt military action. In the shadows of Washington and Richmond, a different kind of war was being fought by female spies. These women used the societal underestimation of their intelligence to their advantage. Rose O'Neal Greenhow was a prominent socialite in Washington, D.C., who charmed Union officers and politicians to gather intelligence for the Confederacy. Her coded messages hidden in the intricate hairstyles of her couriers provided the South with crucial information before the First Battle of Bull Run. She proved that a whisper in a parlor could be as deadly as a cannon on the field. On the other side of the conflict, Elizabeth Van Lew ran a sophisticated spy ring for the Union right in the heart of the Confederate capital of Richmond. She was a wealthy woman who pretended to be mentally unbalanced to avoid suspicion, earning her the nickname Crazy Bet. Under this guise, she visited Union prisoners of war and smuggled out information regarding Confederate troop movements. She even placed one of her former slaves, Mary Bowser, as a servant in the Confederate White House. Together, they funneled high-level secrets directly to General Ulysses S. Grant, demonstrating that the most effective soldiers often wore no uniform at all. Some women refused to be relegated to support roles and took the drastic step of disguising themselves as men to fight. Sarah Emma Edmonds enlisted in the 2nd Michigan Infantry under the alias Franklin Thompson. She marched, fought, and camped alongside her male counterparts for 2 years without being discovered. She participated in several major battles, including the First Battle of Bull Run and Antietam. Her story is just one of hundreds of documented cases of women binding their chests and cutting their hair to serve their country. These women faced the double threat of enemy fire and the constant fear of discovery, which would mean court-martial and disgrace. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the scope of warfare expanded globally, and so did the roles of women. When the United States entered World War I, the military faced a new logistical challenge regarding communication. The telephone had become a critical tool for commanding armies spread across miles of trenches. However, the male soldiers struggled with the complex switchboards and the need for rapid bilingual communication. The Army Signal Corps realized they needed a specialized workforce to handle the immense volume of calls required to coordinate artillery and troop movements along the Western Front. The solution was the recruitment of the Signal Corps female telephone operators, unit popularly known as the Hello Girls. These brave women were fluent in both French and English and were sworn into the Army Signal Corps. They deployed to France and operated the switchboards, often within range of German artillery. Despite their status as soldiers, they were denied veteran benefits for decades after the war. Yet during the conflict, they were indispensable, connecting General John Pershing to his commanders in the field. Their speed and accuracy under pressure saved countless lives by ensuring that orders were received before it was too late. The horrors of World War I also saw a massive mobilization of nurses who served closer to the front lines than ever before. The trench warfare created horrific injuries from poison gas and machine gun fire, requiring immediate specialized care. Nurses worked in casualty clearing stations where the sound of the guns was a constant companion. They dealt with the devastating effects of mustard gas, which blinded and blistered soldiers, and the trauma of shell shock. Their resilience in the face of such suffering was a testament to their strength. They were not just caregivers, but witnesses to the brutal reality of modern mechanized warfare. The peace that followed the Great War was fragile and short-lived, leading to the global conflagration of World War II. This conflict demanded the total mobilization of national resources, including the female population. The image of Rosie the Riveter became the symbol of the American home front as millions of women flooded into factories to replace the men fighting overseas. They built the ship's tanks and aircraft that would crush the Axis powers. This was not merely auxiliary work, it was the industrial backbone of the Allied war effort. Without their labor, the arsenal of democracy would have ground to a halt. However, the contribution of women in World War II went far beyond the factory floor. The United States Army Air Forces faced a critical shortage of pilots to ferry aircraft from factories to military bases. To solve this, General Henry Arnold approved the creation of the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP program. These women were experienced civilian pilots who underwent rigorous military training. They flew every type of aircraft in the American arsenal, from small trainers to massive B-29 Superfortress bombers. They towed targets for live anti-aircraft practice, a job that male pilots often refused due to the high danger involved. Jacqueline Cochran, a pioneer aviator and the director of the WASP program, fought tirelessly for the recognition of these female pilots. Under her leadership, over 1,000 women earned their silver wings. They ferried over 12,000 aircraft and freed up male pilots for combat duty overseas. Despite their skill and sacrifice, 38 WASP pilots died in the line of duty. Because they were classified as civilians, they were denied military honors, and their families had to pay for their bodies to be returned home. It would take decades for their service to be officially recognized as active military duty. While the WASPs ruled the skies over America, other women were fighting a clandestine war in occupied Europe. The Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, recruited women for their ability to blend in and move unnoticed. Virginia Hall was perhaps the most dangerous of them all. An American woman with a prosthetic leg, she worked for the British Special Operations Executive and later the OSS in France. The Gestapo considered her one of the most dangerous Allied spies, calling her the Limping Lady. She organized resistance networks, sabotaged German supply lines, and rescued downed Allied airmen. Virginia Hall operated in constant danger, knowing that capture meant torture and execution. She used various disguises to evade the Nazis, once trekking over the Pyrenees Mountains on foot in heavy snow to escape into Spain despite her prosthetic leg. Her sheer will and intellect allowed her to coordinate drop zones for weapons and supplies that armed the French resistance. Her efforts directly contributed to the success of the D-Day invasion by disrupting German communications and transport. She was eventually awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the only one awarded to a civilian woman in World War II. In the Pacific Theater, the experience of women was marked by endurance and survival under brutal conditions. When the Philippines fell to the Japanese forces in 1942, a group of Army and Navy nurses were captured. Known as the Angels of Bataan and Corregidor, these women spent 3 years in internment camps. Despite malnutrition and disease, they continued to care for the sick and wounded within the camp. They maintained their military discipline and morale, refusing to break under the harsh treatment of their captors. Their survival was a testament to their unbreakable spirit and dedication to their duty. Back in the United States, another group of women was fighting the war with mathematics and logic. At Arlington Hall and other secret facilities, thousands of women served as code breakers. They worked tirelessly to decipher the encrypted messages of the Japanese and German military. These women were often recruited from colleges for their skills in math and languages. Their work was highly classified, and they could not tell even their families what they did. They identified the movements of enemy fleets and the locations of supply convoys, providing the intelligence that allowed the U.S. Navy to win decisive battles like Midway. The power of the press was another weapon wielded by women during the war. Martha Gellhorn was a fearless war correspondent who refused to accept the military ban on female journalists at the front. She stowed away on a hospital ship to cover the D-Day landings at Normandy, becoming the only woman to land on the beaches on June 6, 1944. She walked ashore with the stretcher bearers and reported on the carnage and heroism she witnessed. Her reporting provided a raw and unflinching look at the cost of war, giving a voice to the soldiers who fought and died. For African American women, the war offered a chance to serve a country that still treated them as second-class citizens. The 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion was the only all-black female battalion to serve in Europe. Their mission was to clear the massive backlog of mail that was rotting in warehouses in England and France. The Army realized that mail was crucial for soldier morale, and the system had completely broken down. Under the command of Major Charity Adams, these women worked in unheated warehouses infested with rats to sort millions of pieces of mail. The motto of the 6888 was "No mail, low morale." They worked in 3 shifts around the clock, processing an average of 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. They developed a new tracking system to locate soldiers who were constantly moving across the front. In just 3 months, they cleared a backlog that the Army had estimated would take 6 months. Their efficiency and dedication ensured that soldiers on the front lines received letters from home, boosting morale at a critical time in the war. They achieved this while facing both racism and sexism within the military structure. The scientific contributions of women were also instrumental in the outcome of the war. In the secret laboratories of the Manhattan Project, women like Leona Woods played key roles in the development of the atomic bomb. Leona Woods was a physicist who worked closely with Enrico Fermi on the first nuclear reactor in Chicago. She was present when the reaction went critical and helped design the detectors used to monitor the flux of neutrons. Her work and that of countless other female scientists and mathematicians helped end the war and ushered in the atomic age. As the war drew to a close, the question of what would happen to these women became a pressing social issue. The government launched a massive propaganda campaign to encourage women to leave their jobs and return to the domestic sphere to make room for returning veterans. Many women were forced out of the factories and the military ranks they had served so faithfully. The independence and confidence they had gained, however, could not be easily erased. The seeds of the future women rights movement were sown in the shipyards and field hospitals of the war. The legacy of these women is not just written in the history books, but in the fabric of modern society. They proved that capability is not determined by gender, and that courage is a universal human trait. The women of the Civil War paved the way for the nurses of the World Wars, who in turn opened the door for the pilots and soldiers of today. Their struggle for recognition was long and arduous, often taking decades for their service to be acknowledged with the medals and benefits they deserved. Today, women serve in every branch of the United States military and are integrated into combat units. They fly fighter jets, command warships, and lead infantry platoons. This reality would have been unimaginable to the commanders of the Civil War or even World War I. It was the persistence of figures like Harriet Tubman, Clara Barton, and the WASPs that chipped away at the barriers of tradition and prejudice. They demonstrated that when the nation was in peril, they were ready and willing to pay the ultimate price for freedom. The unsung contributions of women in war challenge us to rethink our understanding of history. We often focus on the generals and the politicians, ignoring the millions of people who sustained the war effort behind the scenes. The women who worked in the factories, the code breakers who deciphered enemy secrets, and the nurses who comforted the dying were all essential to victory. Their stories remind us that heroism takes many forms and that the defense of liberty is a shared responsibility. We must remember the Hello Girls who connected the voices of commanders and the spies like Virginia Hall who limped through the snow to fight tyranny. We must honor the women of the 688 who sorted mountains of mail to bring hope to the trenches. These were not temporary substitutes for men, but skilled professionals who excelled in their duties. Their history is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring fight for equality. As we look back on the conflicts that shaped our world, we see the faces of these women emerging from the shadows. They are no longer footnotes in a male-dominated narrative, but central characters in the drama of human conflict. Their unsung songs are finally being heard echoing through the corridors of time. They teach us that in the face of adversity, the most unlikely heroes can rise to change the course of history. The journey from the banks of the Combahee River to the cockpits of modern fighter jets is a long and winding one. It is paved with the sacrifices of women who refused to accept the limitations placed upon them by society. They stepped into the breach when their country needed them most, asking for nothing in return but the chance to serve. Their bravery was not a performance for an audience, but a quiet determination to do what was right. In the end, the story of women in war is a story of transformation. It is the story of how a nation learned to value the contributions of all its citizens. It is a reminder that the strength of a country lies not just in its weapons, but in the hearts of its people. The women of war, both on the battlefield and the home front, defined a legacy of courage that continues to inspire us today. Their voices whisper to us from the past, urging us to recognize the hidden figures in our history. They ask us to look beyond the statues of generals and see the nurses, the spies, and the factory workers who held the line. They are the unsung warriors whose strength held the world together when it threatened to fall apart. We owe them a debt of gratitude that can never be fully repaid. Let us carry their stories forward, ensuring that future generations know the names of Harriet Tubman, Clara Barton, and the brave women of the WASP program. Let their lives serve as a beacon of hope and a reminder of what is possible when we break down the barriers that divide us. They were the women of war, and their legacy is our freedom. The final verdict of history is clear and undeniable regarding their impact. Without the intelligence gathered by female spies, battles might have been lost. Without the supplies built by female workers, armies would have starved. Without the care provided by female nurses, countless more would have died. They were the silent pillars of victory, standing strong against the tides of war. Their courage was never secondary, it was essential.